Today, I'm going to walk you through making my strawberry swirl sourdough recipe. Now, this recipe is really good. So we're going to want to start with 300 grams of water. And the reason why we're using 300 grams, which is a lower amount normally for my recipes, is because we want the dough to be on the drier side because we're going to be adding the preserve. So to that water, we're going to be adding 100 grams of active starter and 40 grams of white sugar, and then 1 teaspoon of strawberry extract and a half a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now I like to add purple sweet potato flour, just about 5 grams ish, it's approximate, just to give it like that cute pink color. It's optional obviously if you want to use it or not. And then we're going to be adding our 10 grams of salt and 470 grams of bread flour. Now we're gonna wanna mix that all up. You can only mix so much, especially with this drier dough with the fork. So normally I like to wet my hands and get in there really well and mix it up. But as you can tell, it is a little bit, I feel like a drier dough is harder to work with than a higher hydration dough, because it's just like, it's a little stiffer. So if you'll notice, like, it's a little harder for me to, scrape the flour off the sides and get it into the dough. And I also try to not wet my hands so much because I don't want to add any additional liquid. Now we let that rest for about 35 minutes to 1 hour, and I came back and we're doing our first set of stretch and folds. So for the first set, I'm really just stretching up and then folding inwards, going around a couple of times until I feel like I've gotten it really nice and, stretched out. And then I'll go back with like one hand to kind of shake it out just to build some strength in the dough. And because this is a lower hydration, it is, not as fluid as like a higher hydration dough. Then I like to scrape the sides, and we'll go ahead and cover this again to sit, and then we'll do our second set. Now for the second set, I like to do coil folds. This is totally preference. You can do stretch and folds throughout the entire time if you'd like, but coil folds is what I like to do. So as you can see, I'm doing just a couple of coil folds, and just after a couple, it's pretty much to its limit. Then I let it sit again for another 30 to 35 minutes, and I'm doing the final set of coil folds. And now you'll be able to tell that the dough is just, the texture is a lot more smooth, and we want it to bulk ferment for about 3 to 12 hours. That is a very long span, but it's really all dependent on your dough's temperature and your kitchen and how active your starter is. So you'll want to look at your dough and kind of tell, check your dough and see if it's ready to start shaping, basically. So some telltale signs that your dough is done bulk fermenting is that it has like a nice domed top, it has risen, it has larger bubbles, and you're able to do the poke test, which means you're able to poke it without it sticking to your fingers. And those are just a couple of signs, but there's definitely some really good resources out there that have charts on like dough temperatures and when it should be done. So now I'm taking about 1/4 cup of strawberry preserve. I've mixed with about a half a tablespoon of flour. In this little measuring cup, I mixed it together just so that it's not as liquidy when it bakes. It's still liquidy, but not as liquidy. And I know this looks like a little bit of preserve, but I'm telling you, when you go to shape this and cook this, you're going to thank me, because if you put too much preserve, it's absolutely unruly. You can't handle it. It's just, I've tried, trust me. So then I like to add some freeze-dried strawberries. I use freeze-dried just because I don't want to add any extra liquid to the dough already. We're adding the preserve, and that's adding additional liquid. So the freeze-dried work really well for me, and they become very moist and back to like, their soft texture once you cook it. So then we're folding it in, and I'm rolling it up. If you'd like to keep your dough in a batard shape, I actually kind of recommend that, because as you can see, after we shape it right here and I tuck in the sides, we're basically at a batard shape, and you can keep it here and you can flour it and then stick it into your basket, proofing basket, and you don't have to do this step. But if you want a bowl shape, which is the round shape, you'll want to squeeze it together kind of like that, but be very gentle because the preserve will come out. So if you'll notice on the sides, there's the jam coming out right there on the top. On the sides, we have like these seams, and we kind of want to get rid of the seams, but you have to just be really, really gentle when working with this because you do not want the preserve to really spill out too much. So I'm just like pinching them together, and then I'm going to tuck in tightly on the direction that I folded the dough, if that makes sense, so that it kind of holds that bowl shape. So I put it in the fridge. I let it cold proof overnight, about 12 to 48 hours. You're able to like keep it cold proofing. And then I also did throw it into the freezer for about 15 minutes prior to doing this. And now I'm going to, obviously score it and stick it in the oven. So this is pink pitaya powder that I'm using, and I should have sprayed the top of my dough with water before I added this, because as you can see, it's kind of not sticking because I already have flour up there. Pink pitaya is kind of particular, and it doesn't like to stick unless you have something to stick it on with. So if you do this, I would recommend to spritz your dough with a little bit of water before you add it, and then start the scoring. I like to do this little swirl score. That's why I like to shape it into a bowl, just because I think it looks really cute. I like to do the initial score, which is not super deep, and then I like to go back and score it at like a 45-degree angle to get up under the dough. It just causes it to expand a little bit better when it's cooking, and keep that nice swirl shape so that it kind of doesn't all cook together and flatten out. Makes it more of like a 3D. Okay, now once I'm done scoring it, because I am open baking, I'm going to spritz it with a little bit of water. This helps when you're open baking. If you're not open baking, you don't have to do this. I'm gonna show you how I open bake. If you're just using a regular Dutch oven, just go ahead and cook this as you would a normal loaf. I would just add a couple additional minutes. So as you can see, I'm sticking it in my oven. I'm covering the glass pane, and I have a cast iron full of lava rocks that I'm pouring hot water on. This is going to create steam. Steam is essential when you're open baking because it helps your dough expand and rise. So you need this. I put it in there for about 20 minutes at 450, and then I remove my steam and I continue cooking for an additional 10 to 12, sometimes 15 minutes, just depending. I like to keep an eye on my dough and make sure that it's fully cooked. So this is me adding some strawberry cream cheese to it, and this was a lovely treat. I hope you guys enjoy this loaf as much as I did.